You're listening to SM Media, the number one place for exclusive content.
Hi everyone, and welcome to the debut episode of the Scottish Football Show, The Rewind, right here on SM Media. I'm Scott McPike, I'm your host as always, delighted to be here. I don't have Wilson and Shankers for this episode, they'll hopefully join us in future episodes, but we're going to do the first episode on France 98, the last time Scotland appeared at a major tournament. I'm delighted to be joined by a very special guest, John Bleasdale. John, it's an absolute pleasure to you on the show. Thanks very much for joining me.
Thanks very much for the invite, Scott. It's an absolute pleasure. I'll talk about France 98 any day because it was a great tournament from my point of view.
Is that the highlight being a Scotland fan, that tournament?
Oh, without a doubt. You know, the fact that Scotland were opening the World Cup, kicking off the World Cup against the world champions Brazil, it was, from a prestige point of view, Scotland have not played in a bigger game. I mean, there's obviously been qualifiers that have been high profile, but in terms of prestige, that's as good as getting to World Cup final for us, because it's unlikely we're going to get there.
Aye, definitely. It's certainly, now we're looking at a tournament for the first time in 23 years. I mean, what age were you, John, when France 98 was here?
When it kicked off, I was 17. Yeah,
Right.
So just to make you feel. So you also told me beforehand that you're 1.5. So
I was one and a half. I was born in
you'd have been in nappies.
1996. Yeah, 1.5.
Yeah.
So I don't remember anything about this tournament, but I have done a lot of research for this, and I'm eager to get started in talking about how this tournament, because it can only be, you look at this tournament, you just think some of the great teams that showed up. Who at the start of the tournament were you thinking were going to come out and top?
I mean, a lot of people were saying Brazil. There was a few that were saying France because of the host nations thing, and obviously they were proven correct. One or two said Germany because Germany were the defending European champions. I actually had a hunch for Argentina at the start, because Batistuta was lethal up front. Claudio Lopez was a good striker, so much so Hernan Crespo couldn't get a team in here. He was a top striker. Varane in midfield was an outstanding player at that point at Parma. There was quite a few Argentinians from Parma. Zanetti, a young Zanetti, was a good player then. Ortega was the next Maradona at that point, and he showed a lot of qualities in tournaments. So, yeah, that was my hunch at the start. They also get beaten by quality in the quarterfinals, as maybe we'll talk about later. But that was my tip at the outset, but I got that wrong.
We'll talk about how Scotland managed to get to France. We'll just talk about their qualifying group. They were drawn against Austria, Sweden, Latvia, Estonia and Belarus. See, before that group started, were you thinking that this was going to be tough, with Sweden being third place in the 94 World Cup? Austria were pretty good as well. Did you think this would be a difficult group to get out of at the start?
I did think it was going to be difficult, but I did think that we would qualify. I actually thought we might top the group because although Sweden, as you rightly said, did well in USA 94, they also didn't make Euro 96. Yeah. And I just had a feeling that because we just come off the back of playing in Euro 96 and playing well in Euro 96, it was goal different. It was David Seaman letting Kluivert score that, knocked us out essentially. But no, I was quite confident about the group. It wasn't an easy group, as you rightly say. Austria had some good players, like Herzog from midfield was a super player. Tony Polster up front was still good. Sweden, as rightly say, had some good players like Kenneth Anderson, Martin Dahlin. Larsson, before he came into real prominence, was sniffing around. So yeah, they had a very good team. But I was confident that Scotland could make it this group.
Mm-hmm. We'll just run through their qualifying games. We started off in August 1996 with a 0-0 draw against Austria. October 96, they won 2-0 against Latvia. It was John Collins and Darren Jackson with the goals. November 1996, a home win against Sweden. It was probably one of the pivotal games. Do you remember who scored the goal that game?
It was John McGinley.
That's
yes,
right.
I remember that vaguely. I mean, he scored after some 8 or 9 minutes. I can't remember exactly. And I just remember the rest of the game. Jonas Tern absolutely dominated the match from midfield. And then Jim Leighton was like a brick wall and goals.
That was kind of the game that solidified his starting position, wasn't it?
Oh, yeah, definitely. I mean, he'd obviously missed out in starting at Euro 96 despite playing most of the qualifiers to Andy Gorham, but that was proven to be the right call because Andy Gorham was absolutely sensational in Euro 96 and he was at his peak then. But Leighton got the gloves back for that game and he didn't relinquish them after that, and he was justified after that performance. in my memory, it's his best Scotland performance by far.
Right.
Obviously, don't remember him in the 80s, but other people might beg to differ. But he had a great night. He was superb that game. That was pivotal to his qualifying, and Sweden obviously finishing third in the group, as it turned out.
Yeah. February 1997 was infamous, obviously going away to Estonia. Do you remember what your reaction was in that game? We'll just touch on what happened. Can you just clarify what happened actually? Because I've confused at how this transpired.
The original game was supposed to be played in October 96 after the Latvia game, so it should have been a double header.
Right.
So Scotland pointed out a problem with the floodlights being too low, and UEFA decided, right, let's move the kick-off time to earlier. So Scotland turned up full kit, but Estonia were still at their hotel having lunch. As far as they were concerned, the game was still at the original evening time kickoff. So it's a rare occurrence that you saw the full game on the news, because the game kicked off, and then obviously the whistle blew within 2 or 3 seconds, and that was game over. There was then the debate: should the game be replayed, or should Scotland be given the victory because Estonia didn't turn up? And there's always a bit of suspicion because Gary McAllister, having been booked in the first 2 games, was due to miss the Estonia game, and he then ended up missing the Sweden game because they rescheduled this Estonia game. And in charge of UEFA at that point was Lennart Johansson, a Swede. So McAllister missed the Sweden game at Ibrox. Unfortunately, we got away with it. But yeah, it was something a bit fishy. But going to Monaco, we were expected to turn them over, and it was a frustrating night and ended up drawing 0-0. It was a frustrating one that could on another day have come back to haunt us, but unfortunately it didn't count when it came to ranking the second place teams, as it turned out.
Yeah. This March 97, Scotland got their revenge in Estonia. They beat them 2-0. Tom Boyd scored, and then it was an own goal from obviously Estonia. April, the double header. The first game we'll touch on was the 2-0 win against Austria, who went on to top the group. Kevin Gallagher with 2 goals. Just how important was that result?
Oh, that was a crucial one. I was actually speaking to Kevin for the Famous Tartan magazine, which will be coming out before the Euros. We've been reminiscing about this game. His second goal was my favourite. One of my favourite Scotland goals of all time. Doesn't get talked often enough. It is a sensational goal because Lambert tries to play a pass to Gordon Dury. It hits off a defender and it comes to Gallagher quickly, just chests it down and then hits it in the half volley. It was just so perfect. Scott, I was at Parkhead that night, and the view I had, it was just coming like that, and you could see it swerve in and then off the post and at the top corner. It was absolutely sensational, and that obviously killed the game off. But we were dominant that night. We were by far dominant. I think Leighton had 1 save to make, I recall, but Scotland could have been 2 or 3 up by half time. Obviously, they were 1 up, and Lambert played a key role in that game. But Kevin Gallagher, this was the start of his purple patch for Scotland, because he'd only scored 2 goals before that for Scotland, and he'd went 3-4 years without scoring for Scotland. Now, bear in mind, for 2 of those years, he had a serious knee leg injury in Blackburn. He broke his leg twice within a year. And he managed to battle back. But this started a great patch for him. He ended up scoring 6 goals in 5 games. And that second goal, I love talking about that goal. It's one of my favourite Scotland goals of all time.
Brilliant. There also was a double header in April 97, Sweden away. Kevin Gallagher got a goal, but Kenneth Anderson got 2 for Sweden, and Sweden won 2-1. What was your thoughts after that game?
I was a bit disappointed because I don't think Scotland asserted themselves well. I mean, we'd had a good defensive record. We only ended up conceding 3 goals throughout this whole campaign. And the previous World European Championship campaign, it was the same. We only lost 3 goals, but 2 of them were in that game. To Ken Anderson, who, as we just touched on, was a good player. So we gave ourselves a minute to climb, but then we get ourselves back in it. But then mentioned Gallagher. He was touched in the box, but he didn't go down. He played on, and he regretted that because we could have had a penalty then, which could have potentially got us back to 2-2. So it was a bit of a blow, but I wasn't overly disappointed because I just thought we've got a few games left, win them all, we've still got ourselves a chance.
And then there was 3 games left in the campaign. A 1-0 win away to Belarus. Gary McAllister with a penalty. A pivotal game against Belarus at home in September 1997 was a 4-1 win. Kevin Gallagher got another 2 goals, and David Hopkin got 2. Did you think that was kind of qualification sealed at that point?
Well, not quite, because we were still obviously, because Austria had beaten Sweden and they completed the double header over Sweden, it meant that they were top going into the last game, and it wasn't a guarantee that we were that second place was good. There was only one second place side were definitely going to get it.
Right.
So you're actually a bit worried that you might fall into the playoff at that point. The Belarus away game was a pivotal one. I know we talk about the home game, they won 4-1 as a convincing win, but away it was a tough game. And for Gary McAllister, a year after he missed that penalty at Wembley, he's then got the penalty to win that game. It's one of those Turgis affairs where he's stuck in the top corner. Just wish he'd done that a year earlier, but it was such a great penalty and such a key moment, because that obviously helped in the States. But the home game, we blew Belarus away. It was a convincing victory. There was a couple of good goals in that from Hopkin. He played very well that day. And yeah, you're just looking. It only became clear a couple of days later when I think Italy drew a game. I can't remember. There was a few going into the last game. We were the best of second place sides, and if we won that last game, then we were going through. Providing that other permutations went our way. I think the main one I remember was Spain were playing the Faroe Islands. So if Spain didn't lose the Faroe Islands at home, as long as we did our job, then we were going to go through. So it was incredible to think, well, we can actually qualify automatically rather than have to go through the playoff. Yeah,
Sales qualification in the October 1997. Where was that at? Was that at Parkhead?
That was at Parkhead. There's a story about that because the way the fixtures were originally, because Hampden was being rebuilt, the last part of Hampden was being rebuilt, they put it around the country. So the Sweden game was at Ibrox, as we've touched on. Rugby Park was for the Estonia game, then Celtic Park for Austria, and then it was Patoja for Belarus. And the last game against Latvia was supposed to be going to Easter Road. But when it became clear SFA, hang on a minute, we could sell 50,000 rather than 15,000, 20,000 as Easter Road held in those days. They had to weigh that up and think, we've got to move this, and they managed to come to an arrangement. So I think Easter Road ended up getting a pre-World Cup friendly against Finland, and they had they moved the game to Celtic Park, and they sold the rights to Channel 5 to cover the game live as well, because beforehand all the home games were highlights in BBC and the away games were live in BBC before Sky took over. So but they decided to put this game out live to whoever was the highest bidder, and Channel 5 launched that year. They were starting to they took, I think they took a Poland England game as well. They were starting to put their foot in the football in those days, and they decided to bid for the Scotland Latvia game and got it. I mean, there was a furore because some people didn't have Channel 5 installed at that point.
Oh, really? But 2-0 win sealed qualification. Kevin Gallagher again and Gordon Jury sealed the victory. And then it was off to France. Were you buzzing were you going to France?
No, I've been able to make France. I mean, I was only just starting to get to games more often at that point. But I was just leaving school at that point, and didn't quite have the finances. But I remember when the draw was made, and it became clear it was Brazil versus Scotland, the opening game. And for Christmas that year, one of my Christmas presents was a packet of 3 VHS tapes. Right. So what I did with one of them was I put on the label Brazil versus Scotland, 10th of June 1998, and kept it aside so I could record the game on the day, and I did that. I don't know where the tape is though. A load of my tapes are still in my mum's loft, but I can't put my hand on this one, and I'm raging because I want to get that and put it on DVD again.
Brilliant. But obviously Craig Brown had a difficult job to pick his squad for France 98. We're going to pretend to be Craig Brown for 5 or 10 minutes here as we're going to pick our own squad, what changes would have made. See, obviously Craig Brown was getting into that tournament, like his first World Cup. Was there a lot of pressure in Craig Brown to deliver here getting into this World Cup?
I don't know if there was pressure. I think there was, though. There was belief that we could get out of this group. I mean, the way it was identified at the beginning was Brazil were going to win the group. Norway were a decent team at that point. They'd actually gone a good unbeaten run. I think they beat Brazil in a friendly at one point in Oslo. But there was still a belief that Norway were quite similar to ourselves. And we obviously done okay against Sweden qualifiers. I think Norway were getting, and we believed that we could take care of Morocco as well. So yeah, I don't know if there was pressure on Craig, but I think there was more expectation that having done so well last tournament, and because of the defensive record we had, that we could finally get the monkey off our back and qualify for the later stages of a major tournament. Let's
get into it. Let's get into our squad. We'll start off with the goalkeepers. The 3 that went were Jim Leighton, Neil Sullivan and Jonathan Gould. Out of those three, who are you taking all three of them?
Well, the way circumstances dictating, if Andy Gorham had made himself available, Jonathan Gould wasn't getting on that plane.
Yeah,
but Andy Gorham withdrew for personal reasons, as it turned out, and he didn't have a great season with the Rangers, and it was his last season at Rangers. So, given he made himself unavailable, that was an easy choice with those three, to be perfectly honest, because Jonathan Gould had won the title with Celtic. Neil Sullivan was doing very well at a Wimbledon side that was doing well in the Premier League, and Jim Leighton, of course, legendary goalkeeper, had to go.
Yeah, we'll move on to defenders. We'll just declare what we're going to do here. We're going to go through the defenders that went, and we're going to put suggestions. We're going to say if we didn't think one defender was going to go, here's the alternatives that we maybe took instead. We're just going to run through the defenders with Tom Boyd at Celtic, Colin Calderwood at Tottenham, Colin Hendry at Blackburn, Tosh McKinlay at Celtic, David Weir at Hearts, Matt Elliott at Leicester, and Derek White at Aberdeen, and Christian Daly at Derby. Right, out of those names, who are we agreeing? Tom Boyd goes.
Tom Boyd's going. Yeah.
Tom Boyd.
He makes the plane.
Colin Calderwood
going. Yeah, without doubt.
Colin Henry's the captain. Obviously, he's going.
Yeah, and they were the solid back three that kept clean sheets for a while. So yeah, they were easy picks.
They're three stick-ons. Tosh McKinlay?
No.
I've got to get Tosh McKinlay down either. Yeah. We'll come back to that in a minute. David Weir?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Matt Elliott?
He was maybe one that that was swithered on, but I think he probably just about did enough to merit his place. So yeah, I'm keeping him in.
I'll get Matt Elliott in. Christian Daly?
Yes, without doubt.
Christian Daly straight in. Derek White?
I'm keeping in. And maybe my club bias is coming in because I'm an Aberdeen supporter, but when he came to Aberdeen for regular first team football, he actually helped solidify our defence for a bit. It wasn't a great Aberdeen team, but yeah, he just about deserved to make that place.
Right, I don't have.
Although you could have made allowances for Paul Ritchie of Hearts, who had a terrific season at Hearts that year. Yeah. That's maybe one that might have made it in other circumstances, but he hadn't been capped before the tournament.
Mm-hmm. Derek, the only thing that struck me with Derek White is when you look back at his Scotland, he only played once for Scotland in 2 years before the World Cup, which always struck me as why that was and why he was in the squad. But we'll go to Tosh McKinlay. I've got two names written down here that I would probably say could be in contention. Mm-hmm. I've got Callum Davidson and I've got Gary Naismith. I'll start with Callum Davidson. He'd moved to Blackburn in February 98 for 1.75 million. He was obviously a prospect. He didn't make his debut until September. Was there a lot of thought about him maybe? Obviously becomes a regular after this. Was there thoughts about him maybe going to the World Cup that year after his big move?
Yeah, I think I can't remember him being touted so much. I know Naismith definitely was at that point because that Hearts team won the Scottish Cup. They pushed Celtic and Rangers right through to April in the Premier League and then fell away at the end. And he was an 18-year-old that came in and did absolutely superb. Or was he 19? I can't remember. He was certainly a teenager. But again, those were two guys with no caps. The guy I put in that I would have taken was Stuart McCall. Now, the reason I put Stuart McCall in Tosh McKinley's place, Stuart McCall could play right wing back, and you could move people. You could move other people to left wing back where McKinley played, and McCall could play in centre midfield. Stuart McCall should be in that plane. And having spoken to Craig Brown, I think he admits that maybe that's one that he should have taken instead. Yeah,
I've got Callum Davidson going, and I've sacrificed Derek White for another midfielder. But we'll move on to midfielders later on in the show. But I've got Callum Davidson going instead of Tosh McKinley, and you've got Stuart McCall. We'll move on. You could have made a mention for Paul Ritchie. I obviously spoke to Paul Ritchie last week, and I did ask him about it. He said he wasn't ready. He didn't think he was ready to go to the World Cup. But we'll move on to midfielders. We'll go with who the midfielders went. Jackie McNamara at Celtic, Craig Burley at Celtic, John Collins was at Monaco, Paul Lambert Celtic, Scott Gemmell Nottingham Forest, and Billy McKinlay at Blackburn. Jackie McNamara, never heard him being a midfielder, but apparently he was down as a midfielder to go here.
Yeah, well, he did play between right mid and right back for Celtic most of that season. So and he went with Scotland mainly as a right wing back, but yeah, he deserved to go because he was player of the year for Celtic that season, or one of the. You get the players win, and Burley got the writers win.
Yeah, there's four stick-ons here for me, and I don't know about you, but Craig Burley definitely goes for me.
Oh, without doubt, yeah.
John Collins as well.
Yeah.
Obviously, we see what he does later on.
Always.
Paul Lambert's just won a Champions League.
Yeah.
So we've got those four stick-ons. Scott Gemmell for Nottingham Forest.
I wouldn't have taken him.
I wouldn't have taken him either. Again, I think Craig Brown did like him because he took him to a lot of squads. And
I think say be fair to Craig, I've obviously spoken to him a couple of times. Really good guy, loves his stats. He made a good point when I last spoke to him. The easiest team to pick is someone else's team, and I get what he means. So, but I think with Scott Gemmell was someone that went and never always went on, but it was someone that it was handy to have around the squad, I think. And he never pulled out of squads when other people might have done it left, right, and centre. So I think that loyalty always stuck with Craig Brown. But personally, I mean, he'd had a decent season in what's now the Championship, the old First Division down south, as Forest went up. But I wouldn't have taken him because I don't think he was international quality, to be perfectly honest. And I would have taken David Hopkin, who'd played 30 odd games for Leeds United, scored in the playoff final year before, scored twice. As we said, against Belarus. I would have taken him instead of Scott Gemmell.
Yeah. Billy McKinlay.
I would have kept him in because he was doing all right at Blackburn. So but you could have maybe suggested. Again, we're going to go to this Hearts team. Colin Cameron was one that could have went there.
Yeah, I've got a lot of names written down for midfield, but the two that stood out to me, I've not got Billy McKinlay going. I've got Stuart McCall, David Hopkin, and I've put a winger in here, but it probably goes down as a forward. But we'll probably put him in the forward. So I've got a space.
Yeah,
I've got Stuart McCall and David Hopkin again. Stuart McCall played 40 times for Rangers that season.
Yeah. He should have went, and he was always dependable for Scotland. He was actually. There's a great stat about Stuart McCall that Stuart brought up himself. He is the only player that played every minute at Italian 90, Euro 92, and Euro 96.
Yeah, I mean that experience would have been key to a team like that, wouldn't it?
Yeah, and I do think Brown. I think there's two selections. We'll no doubt talk about the other one later, but there's two selections that Brown, I think, deep down regrets not taking. Stuart McCall's definitely one of them.
Yeah, I've got Stuart McCall and David Hopkin. We'll move on to the strikers. Craig Brown took 5. Kevin Gallagher at Blackburn, Gordon Durie at Rangers, Darren Jackson, Simon Donnelly both at Celtic, and Scott Booth at Utrecht. Kevin Gallagher, again, stick on.
Oh, he goes. 6 goals in 5 games, he had to go.
Yeah. Gordon Durie, Rangers. We should just mention as well, a few midfielders I wanted to kind of get your thoughts on, particularly one of them, because I know you're a big fan of one of them. Ian Jess, could he have potentially been in contention?
He was very close, I think. He was certainly in there. I personally don't have him in there, which pains me to say as an Aberdeen fan. But I'm struggling to see where the space is because as I say, I give my reasons for taking Hopkin over Gemmell, but I'm struggling to see where else. I mean, potentially he could have come in for McKinlay, and potentially he could have been the one to replace Scott Booth for me. But we'll talk about who I would have taken for the other striker in a minute. But just misses out for me, and that pains me because Ian Jess is a terrific player.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I've said that Ian Jess is one of my favourite technical players ever. Mm-hmm. The reason I'm saying likes like Ian Jess, a few I want to get your thoughts on that. Obviously, I don't think they would have went and would probably not have been in contention, but Ian Ferguson, the year before, had got into the situation with the fans against Estonia. Was there any thought about him coming back into the fold, or was would it not have been welcomed at the time?
I don't know about the welcoming thing. He wasn't the most popular with the Scotland fans anyway. Even before that, because I don't think there's no performances that stand out for me whenever he played for Scotland, but he'd lost his place in the Rangers team as well. He's in and out of the Rangers team, so he was a good player. Obviously, he did very well for Rangers, and that should be respected. But I don't think he did enough to get anywhere near the World Cup squad. Definitely not.
Yeah. You mentioned Colin Cameron as well. Scored a goal in the Scottish Cup final that year. 25-year-old, obviously goes on to be a Scotland regular. The thing with these things, particularly for me, is I'm thinking these players were brilliant, obviously, after this.
Mm-hmm.
So, but again, Colin Cameron, was there any kind of mention he could have been in contention?
Yeah, I mean, I think the problem that they had was when had the pre-worlds, and there was a couple of B internationals as well, but the World Cup friendlies were the opportunity for the likes of Cam, Paul Ritchie, and Gary Naismith potentially to be brought in. I think a couple of them played in the B internationals. There was a couple of B internationals as well. I remember being at one. I think it was Wales. I remember being at one at Broadwood, but I can't remember the game, to be brutally honest. But so there was possibilities that I think had they been in any of those squads and impressed, they might have got into the World Cup squad. But they bring an uncapped player to World Cup. It's very rare that ever happens.
Mm-hmm. Gary McAllister's one obviously was, I think, did he tear his ACL that season?
Yeah, he did.
He would have been. He
did
been
his
there,
ACL. Otherwise, he would have definitely been on the plane. He'd have been there and been the captain.
Yeah, definitely. One player I want to get your thoughts on. I'm not saying he would have went, but there was a player that played for Aberdeen, obviously an Aberdeen fan. Stephen Glass?
No, not at that point. Stephen Glass was a good
was
player.
He well thought of at that point, yeah?
Oh yeah, he was well thought by Aberdeen fans, without a doubt. But there's a big difference between. I mean, that Aberdeen team did not do very well. They finished sixth in the league. Roy Aitken get sacked early in the season. As I say, Leighton deserved place, and Derek White probably just deserved it from his defensive aspects. But apart from me and Jess, there was no Aberdeen player that deserved to be mentioned near the Scotland squad.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, right. Let's move on to the strikers. We obviously mentioned Kevin Gallagher, Gordon Dury, Darren Jackson, Simon Donnelly, and Scott Booth. Was there any you're disagreeing with? Is there any you wouldn't have? Who was the player that you would sacrifice?
Well, for me, it would have been Scott Booth.
I've not got Scott Booth going.
Yeah, and Ali McCoist would have been on the plane, and Craig Brown openly admits that he should have took McCoist. And there's games that will come on to where McCoist might have made a difference. McCoist towards the end of that season was excellent. He's got himself back in the Rangers team. He's scoring goals again. And I know he was 35, 36 at the time, but he'd have been reliable to come on and do something. Maybe not to start games, but to come on when you need a goal. He should have went for me instead of Scott Booth. And again, Scott Booth's a former Aberdeen player. And he did okay when he went to Utrecht on loan, but nah, not for me.
Yeah, I'm with you in McCoy's going for Scott Booth. No, I've got one space, and I just want to get your thoughts on these players. I'm not saying any of these players go, but I just want to. I've got Neil McCann down as a forward, obviously as a winger, but Neil McCann that season for Hearts, I would say, watching videos back, I think Neil McCann's probably one of the top talents in Scotland at that point. Neil
McCann should have been over the couple of seasons before. I remember a performance they put for Hearts against Rangers in the League Cup final. Rangers won it 4-3. This was a game where Paul Gascoigne showed up for 5 minutes and won the game by himself with two terrific goals. That's just the player that he was. But Neil McCann was outstanding in that final. He ripped Rangers to shreds that day. And I think he should have been capped in the couple of years. And as I said before, had he had a cap before, he'd have had a chance to reach this World Cup. But unfortunately, for whatever reason, I think the thing was Craig Brown didn't like to make too many changes to squads. Now, you can't argue with that record. I've been interested to see if someone like McCann with something different to offer might have done. He ended up not doing all right for Scotland when he eventually got capped.
Yeah. Another player that, obviously, another winger I want to get your thoughts on was Alan Johnston. He came into the squad after the World Cup in '98, but he was doing really well at Sunderland. Could they have provided that bit of width that Scotland maybe needed in that tournament?
Again, potential, but again, you're talking about someone that hadn't been in the Scotland squad. Yeah. I think, again, he might have been a couple of the B internationals. I need to research back on that. Don Hutchison was another one that played in a couple of those B internationals, but didn't quite make the grade this one. So that would have been interesting. But I think Craig, to be fair to him, he had a squad that had been doing well from, and it would have been something really special. I don't think Alan Jones, whilst he did okay at Sunderland that season, it wasn't anything spectacular enough to break the barriers, and Brown had a rigid setup and he wasn't going to break it. Yeah,
there's a player that played 4 times, he was at Aberdeen at this point, and he played 4 times for Scotland in that qualifying campaign. Billy Dodds?
Billy's always lost his way for a good while. And again, that night, when he first came into the Scotland squad, him and Dean Windass were flying with Aberdeen, and then under Roy Aitken, and Aberdeen were second in the league, and then they nosedived. And for the next 18 months, I don't think Dodds was the same player. He ended up leaving Aberdeen at the end of that season, so at the start of the following season, and then that's where his Scotland career took off. But no, he didn't do anywhere near enough to get into contention for me.
Yeah, another couple I want to touch on. John McGinley, obviously we touched on, got the winner against Sweden. Was it injuries that kind of played a part in him not going, or was there ever really?
I think John McGinley, it's interesting, and scored some goals. And again, as we touched on, he scored that goal against Sweden. Those happened in years, in season 495, and then 96, 97, when Bolton were in the old First Division and winning they won the playoff one of the years and won the title the other year. The two other seasons which coincided with the U96 squad and World Cup 98, Bolton won the Premier League, and he found goals harder to come by. So I think had they been alternate years, he might have made the squads, but because of those years he didn't do so well, that's why he didn't quite make it. He was maybe a little unfortunate that way, but I don't think he obviously wasn't good enough in the Premier League. And there was other players in, like Simon Donnell in particular. He had a terrific season with Celtic that year, winning the title. Great link up with McNamara. He deserved his spot.
I've got those four in. I just wanted, there's a few more I want your thoughts on. You mentioned Don Hutchison, but we'll move on to one that played at Euro 96. What happened to John Spencer?
Well, John Spencer moved to QPR and it didn't really work out. That's the bottom line. He was in and out of the Chelsea team. He moved for regular first team football. QPR spent a good bit of money to try and get back into the Premier League after being relegated, but it never worked out at all. QPR nosedived. They went into the wilderness for a good number of years, and for Spencer, it just didn't work out at all. That's the simple reason why he didn't make it.
Yeah. Another player who done really well for Wolves was Dougie Freedman, who was obviously known for Crystal Palace. He played a lot for the B team, and Craig Brown had said a couple of years before he was really, really looking to bring him into the international fold. What was the thoughts on Freedman? Was there ever kind of any thought he might go?
Again, that's someone that never. I mean, his first cap for Scotland didn't come to the very end of Craig Brown's reign, which was a bit bizarre. It was Craig Brown's last game against Latvia, his first cap, and then he got his second cap against France under Bertie Vogts and was never seen again on the international stage. It was weird because, he'd been scoring goals, as you say, in the old Division 1. He then scored a couple for Nottingham Forest in the Premier League, but for some reason he just went under the radar. He just wasn't talked about often, and he never came into consideration. And like we said before, it's very rare that uncapped players make the World Cup. You need to be really, really top drawer. Although I know England took Theo Walcott, but that was a bizarre one.
Yeah.
But yeah, Dougie Freedman was never in contention.
Last one, I'd been a regular for Scotland, Duncan Ferguson. And I know there was a thing with I think he refused to be selected after protesting against his treatment. Was there talk of trying to get him back into the squad, and how do you think he would have made an impact in that squad if he'd been?
I think Duncan Ferguson, had he made himself available, would have been one of the first names in that sheet to go. But he made it clear that he didn't want to play for Scotland. I don't know if there was attempts made before that tournament. I know Bertie Vogts tried to coax him out and he wasn't interested. He just made his mind up. I get it to a degree. I don't think Scotland used him right. The game against Estonia, Duncan Ferguson, you just look at him, big guy, and think, let's just punt the ball up to him. Duncan Ferguson was really good with the ball at his feet too. But we never used him right. So maybe I'd go probably long balls up to him all the time.
But we'll move on to the tournament. We've got our squads in place. The group of weights was Brazil, Norway, and Morocco. As a fan, what was your thoughts and hopes going into that tournament with that group?
Well, my hopes was get second place. You go into that opening game, it's a free hit. You're up against the world champions, the best team on the planet, with some of the best players, the number one player, Ronaldo. Anything you're getting out of that's a bonus. You go in with hope, thinking maybe we can get rid of this. But the other two, you're thinking, 4 to 6 points. Then it should be good enough to go through, because you're banking on Brazil winning all 3 games. There was a lot of optimism going into that tournament. We had a good squad. there was a good feel-good factor. The defence was solid for a good while. Didn't really concede many goals, so yeah, there was hope that we could get out of this group.
Talk about the starting 11 that Scotland put out, and then we'll mention the Brazil one. Scotland line up with Jim Leighton, Tom Boyd, Colin Calderwood, Colin Hendry, Christian Daly at defence, Paul Lambert, Craig Burley, John Collins in midfield, and a front three of Kevin Gallagher, Gordon Dury, and Darren Jackson. Yeah, what was your thoughts on that lineup?
Well, I'm going to correct you there, Scott, because it was a 5-3-2.
Was it a 5-3-2?
Yeah,
right, okay.
So Craig Burley played right wing back, and Christian Daly played left wing back, and you had your back three, and Darren Jackson played the whole off the front two of Gallagher and Dury. Because there was a lot of debate about that, because Craig Burley that season scored 16 goals from midfield for Celtic. Now, he had been playing as a right wing back for a while for Scotland, but now he'd advanced his game to playing in centre midfield, and with Jackie McNamara playing the right, Jackie McNamara was Player of the Year from a player's point of view for his position for playing as a right wing back, right midfield. Craig Burley was the Football Writers Player of the Year for being a centre midfielder, but Craig Burley ended up playing right wing back, and McNamara was on the bench, and I think that was the wrong call. Because no harm to Darren Jackson. Darren Jackson was a willing runner, a decent enough striker. He had his problem with his brain injury, but he fought back from that. But Darren Jackson was not the man to play in the hole. That was not his game. It should be McNamara right, Burley in the hole.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. That's the way I looked at it, and I watched the game back, and I was confused. I thought Burley was just a free man in the midfield, but there you go. You learn something new. Brazil's lineup, we'll touch on that. Taffarel, Cafu, Aldir, Junior Baiano, Roberto Carlos is the back four. Cesar Sampaio, Dunga, Giovanni, Rivaldo is the four in midfield, and a front two of Ronaldo and Bebeto. Was a horror going through your mind when you saw that lineup?
Well, it was when I first read it, because Brazil actually named their starting lineup a month before the game.
Oh, did they?
And originally, Romario was in it instead of Bebeto.
Right, okay.
But Romario got injured. So we just had to make do with Bebeto instead. Could you imagine if it was Romario and Ronaldo? That would have been really frightening. But Bebeto was a class player too. So, yeah, just world class throughout that team. In fact, on the bench, they had Danielson, the world's most expensive player at that point. Yeah, so that just, and it didn't quite work out from then, but that just shows the quality it has. I mean, Cafu was the best right back, one of the best right backs in the world at that time. Roberto Carlos, one of the best left backs at that point. Dunga was a tremendous captain. Rivaldo was outstanding for Barcelona, and as Ronaldo, best player on the planet. One of the if I was naming a world 11 from players in my lifetime, Ronaldo would be one of the first names in my team sheet. That Ronaldo, he was outstanding. Yeah.
And going into that game, it was obviously the opening game of the World Cup. Was it excitement that Scotland were going to be the showpiece in the world stage for the first game?
Oh, big time. I've never seen a build-up to a World Cup like it, or a major tournament before or since. I mean, that might get challenged for the fact that Scotland did the Euros this year, but the build-up was incredible. Businesses were letting their folk go home from work early. Shops were full. You could barely get a saltire anywhere. The cakes in the shop with the good luck Scotland and all the rest of it. I remember a lot of the programmes before the tournament started. There was you had your throwbacks to previous World Cups. You had your previews to this World Cup, sports scene specials, all the rest of it. McCoy's Macaulay. So Alan McCoy's was at the World Cup, but doing his McCoy's Macaulay gig that was on, and things like that. There was also a play.
What's that? The blonde hair.
Yes, that's right. That was a thing. Everyone seemed to be dyeing their hair blonde. In fact, Romania, the whole team, after they qualified, the whole team did it, apart from the goalkeeper, because he was bald. It was strange, but it was an incredible phenomenon. But yeah, the build-up was just incredible, Scott. It was. We just couldn't wait. As I say, I couldn't wait for 6 months. I had the tape ready from Christmas to the game in June.
And the game starts obviously in 5 minutes in. Cesar Sampaio gives Brazil the lead. It was just a poor bit of marking, wasn't it? It was just nobody picking him up.
It was unlike Scotland. We never conceded goals from set pieces. we very rarely conceded goals, as we've talked about. That qualifying campaign lost 3 goals. Euro 96 we only lost the 2 against England, and the previous World Cup qualifier again it was just the 3 goals that we lost. So 8 goals in 2 years of competitive football, and then we concede one from a corner after 5 minutes against the world champions. You expect when you're playing that Brazil team, they're going to carve you open with great play. So to lose a goal from a set piece against them, that was just freakish. And you think 5 minutes and it's like, oh God, what's it going to be? That you're really worried that it was going to be a doing after that.
And Scotland fight back tremendously well, got a few good chances. Brazil got a few good chances as well, and it's kind of even game. Would you go along with that? That was before half time. It was a pretty even game.
Yeah, it was definitely being an even game. We had a couple of wee half chances from Jury in particular. We had a couple of wee scares, like Colin Hendry nearly scored an own goal, and Jim Leighton's made 2 very good saves from Carlos and Ronaldo. The Ronaldo was a really good save, actually. It was low down to his right. But we started growing in. We were comfortable on the ball, and then we get the penalty just before half time, and I talked to him because he talked about his story. Was his dream was playing his he was playing his back garden, dreaming of playing Brazil in the World Cup final, and this was his World Cup final, except it was finals, not final. And I joked to him saying, in your back garden, did you fall for the penalty? But to be fair, he felt contact and felt the need to go down, whereas the year before he didn't get the penalty. So it was soft, but maybe it was a penalty. Maybe that's my tartan specs talking, mind you.
It's debatable if it was a penalty or not, but John Collins steps up, and I've heard John Collins talk about the pressure he felt that day and how calm was he going to hitting that penalty. It's one of the most calm. It's one of the most remarkable penalties I've ever seen. How calm he was when he stepped up to it.
Oh yeah, definitely. He was the coolest man in the Stade de France that day. It was just so ice cool. But then John Collins was a fantastic player. That time he's in a Monaco side that reached the Champions League semi-final and won the French League 2 years in a row. So he was an absolutely classy player, and he's just the one that you wanted on the spot that day, and he took it absolutely perfectly, right in the bottom corner. Tafarel wasn't that far away, but it was just well enough in the corner. It was a terrific penalty, and it's a wonderful moment, Scott. We'll never forget that moment when we got ourselves back level against the world champions.
It was 1-0 going in at half time, and then going into the second
1-0
half.
half time.
1-0 half time. Brazil come back out in the second half. Brazil come back into the game, I would say. I think Brazil would have probably the better chances in Scotland. Then the 15 minutes to go, we get the dreaded winner for Brazil. It's weird because it's a great pass from Dunga, a great run from Cafu, first of all. Dunga hits a perfect pass. Jim Leighton does really well to save it, but hits it onto Tom Boyd and it's a goal. 2-1 Brazil. Just how sore was that?
It's just a typical Scottish moment, isn't it? We lose it in typical Scottish. Oh, it was so cruel. Because we'd ridden that storm at the start of the second half. You mentioned Rivaldo had a couple of really good shots that tested us, and fortunately went the other side of the post. And you thought that you'd overridden that storm, that we were looking good for a point. We were looking almost comfortable, and then when that happens, nothing Jim Leighton could have done. He makes an excellent save. Nothing Tom Boyd could have done, because if he's not there, I think it's Ronaldo's got a tap in, and unfortunately it just reacted so quickly. Colin Hendry just couldn't react in time on the line. It was absolutely gut wrenching. Because maybe being a bit biased saying that I don't think we deserved that, but maybe Brazil were slightly the better team in the day. But we've dug in so hard that we deserve something.
And obviously it finishes 2-1 Brazil full time. But after that reaction, was there a confidence that how well Scotland had played against Brazil, that this would be potentially a good group to get off? It was a great performance against the best team in the world, as you say.
Yeah, without a doubt, I think there was a lot to be confident about, because we'd played well in the game. We'd given Brazil a run for their money. It took a fluky on goal for them to beat us. They never beat us through, the skill that they're capable of. We kept. Ronaldo was a threat, but apart from the one chance in the first half, we kept him at arm's length. We managed the game very well, and you did feel confident that we had something to build on for the next 2 games. Obviously, you're in a position where you can't lose or you're out. But no, there was definitely confidence. There was a lot of feel-good factor thinking we might actually be good enough to get out this group.
Yeah. The day after that, the other 2 teams, Norway played Morocco. That finished 2-2. So was that as good a result as you could hope for?
Oh, without a doubt, you don't want either side winning, and I think Morocco were really unlucky in that game. Morocco absolutely dominated that match, and it was an own goal and a goalkeeping error that cost them, 2 points that night, and obviously it came back to bite them. They were by far the better team. Now, when I watched that game, I'm thinking, they looked very fast. Definitely a team to be wary of, but you felt more confident coming up against Norway after that, because then you're realising maybe Norway aren't as good as what they had been the previous year.
We'll move on to the game against Norway. It was the second game in the group. Scotland remain unchanged. Were you surprised that Craig Brown start with the same starting 11?
I wasn't overly, no. I mean, you're kind of hoping that he brings McNamara in and moves Burley further forward, but it wasn't a big surprise that he kept the same. I would have made that one change. And again, it's no harm to Darren Jackson, but he didn't play well enough, and he had a booking early on in that game. I would have kept him in reserve to coming on for either Gallagher or Jury if needed, but no. Craig Brown's far more qualifying experience than us two put together, so I'm not arguing with him.
We'll move on to the Norway team that lined up. There's some names in here that are interesting for Scottish football fans. Groda started in nets. It was a back four of Ronnie Johnson, Henning Berg, Stig Inchbjørnebye, and the famous Dan Eggen. Dan Eggen's one of my pals. Absolutely loves Dan Eggen.
Oh, really?
It's an old running joke, but a really good Norway midfield of Stali Solbakken, Kjell Rekdal, Fidel Riseth, obviously of Celtic, and Rostrand, and a front 2 of Tore André Flo and Havard Flo. Who out that Norway team stood out to you?
Tore André Flo at a sore thumb. He was excellent with Chelsea at that point. He'd been playing very well for them, especially in Europe. I mind away to Betis, he scored 2 really good goals, and they were with his feet. It wasn't with his head. Obviously, he came up to Scotland and was much of a maligned figure. But when you actually look at his goal scoring record in Scotland, it was actually pretty good. Definitely. But he didn't deliver in Old Firm games and European games, which is what they paid 12 million for. But yeah, he definitely still a sore thumb. Interesting you mentioned Eggen. So the 2 goal scorers in the Morocco and Norway game was Cheapo own goal and Eggen. So Eggen Cheapo.
Brilliant. But that Norway game obviously would have been one that Scotland would have been confident getting into, but just after the second half, we'll run through the first half, sorry. The first half was kind of even Stevens. What did you kind of think of it?
I think Scotland were by far the better team in that first half. I don't think there was any clear-cut chances, but there was certainly a good few half chances. There was one where Christian Daly has a ball across the face of goal. If Kevin Gallagher went in that tournament with a hernia problem, and he was trying to, with Blackburn, he was managed it by not training as much, but he had to train with Scotland. Otherwise, there would have been panic thinking Gallagher might miss a game. It was maybe the year before he might have been more switched on and putting that in the net. That was certainly the type of thing that you think Alan McCoy should have been there. Gordon Dury had a looping header that went wide. Daly had one that was headed off the line. Well, we were really knocking the door in that first half, and it was really annoying that we didn't get our noses in front.
See, the one thing that sticks out to me with Kevin Gallagher, remember the Only Excuse sketch where he's a sub for Blackburn and he comes on and the guy high-fives him and he gets it's one of the funniest things I've ever seen. But that's, whenever I think of Kevin Gallagher, I think of that. He's a guy I'd love to interview, actually.
He's brilliant. He is absolutely brilliant, Scott. Try your best. I'll put in a good word for you, mate.
Brilliant. Thanks very much. We'll get into the second half, and again, it's another poor bit of marking. Havard Flo comes in at the back post, and it's a really good header, actually. 1-0 Norway. What was your thoughts on that?
My thought was, God, we're getting out here. It's quite simple. We don't shut down the cross. A good cross by Riseth, but it's not shut down enough. And yeah, Christian Daly switches off, and Flo sneaks in behind him, and it's a really poor goal to lose. And you think after the pressure you put in this, the first half, to lose a goal right at the start of the second was a real sucker punch. And yeah, I feared at that point that we were going to lose the game and that would have put us out there and then. Yeah,
I've watched all 3 games back, and I just want before we touch on the equaliser, this game is tailor-made for Ali McCoy as I've ever seen. he should have been on right after that goal if he was there, because you have that guy. All he needs a chance. All Alan McCoist needs a chance, and I think that this game was tailor-made for him. But Scotland do equalise. It's a really, really weird goal for Craig Burley. It's just this lob that, I guess, 20 years ahead of its time, but it's a great equaliser, great piece of play. What did you kind of think of the goal? Were you impressed?
Very impressed, and it just said to us all, why wasn't this in place at the start of the tournament? Because that was what Craig Burley was doing all season with Celtic, was making those advanced runs beyond the strikers and putting chances away. And it's a great ball by David Weir, who came on for the injured Colin Calderwood, who broke his arm. It's a tremendous ball from him into that space. But McNamara came on for Jackson in that game. Jackson picked up his second booking in the tournament, was taken off. It made a difference, just moving Burley in that position. He'd been playing in all season. He was a capable wing back, but he was a much better goal scoring midfielder, and he proved it there. And you just look at that and thinking, why wasn't that done at the start? And then Burley has a chance a few minutes later that Grodas makes a good save. If that goes in, we're potentially looking at 1 point away from going through to the next round.
It finishes 1-1. Were you happy with that point? Did it feel like 2 points dropped?
I was disappointed we didn't win the game, but I still felt reasonable to do the business, because I did believe that we could beat Morocco in the last game. And I believed that Norway wouldn't beat Brazil this time. I just thought that even if Brazil were getting in with 2 wins in the belt already through, I thought Brazil would be motivated enough by revenge from that Oslo defeat that they would go and take care of Norway this time. So I was still reasonably confident. More fool me.
The second match day, Brazil played Morocco. It was a 3-0 convincing win for Brazil. Going into that Morocco game, were Scotland favourites?
They were definitely favourites, but Roberto Carlos made a point saying that he thought Morocco were the better the two teams that Brazil had played that in the tournament, which almost doesn't make sense, because Scotland only lost 2-1 to Brazil and Morocco were beaten 3-0. But you also saw something in them about their attacking flair that thought that they could cause Scotland problems, and unfortunately it was proven right. But we were definitely favourites in that game, given the fact that we were so close against Brazil in that opening game, and Morocco had been beaten quite convincingly.
We'll get into the lineup Scotland put out for this game. This is definitely a 5-3-2. Burley plays in the midfield here. Right. We'll go through the Jim Leighton starts and goals. A back five of Jackie McNamara, Colin Henry, David Weir comes in for Colin Calderwood, who he said had broke his arm. Christian Daly gets moved in, and Tom Boyd. Does Tom Boyd play left back?
Boyd was still one of the 3 centre backs, and Daly continued at wing back.
Right, okay. And obviously same 3 midfield of Lambert, Burley and Collins, and Gallagher and Jury made up the front 2. Morocco started with a 5-3-2 as well. They started with Ben Zikri, Zaber, Trike, Naibet, Abrami, Khalej, a midfield 3 of Mustafa Hadji, formerly of Aston Villa, Amzine, Chipo, who scored in the first game, and a front 2 of Ada and Basir. Do those 2 names bring back nightmares?
They just end up ragdolling Scotland that night. I mean, I remember a lot of the focus was on their goalkeeper, Ben Zeka, because he had, as I said before, he had a nightmare against Norway in the first game. He wasn't great against Brazil's second game, and a lot of people said, like, get the ball on him, he'll make mistakes, and we'll capitalise on that. And it ended up being our number 1 that had a nightmare that night.
And we'll get into the early stages of the game. Basir gives Morocco the lead at 1-0. What on earth happened there?
I watched this go back earlier today, actually, for research for my sins, and I don't know how Colin Hendry gets beating my ball over the top when he's standing at the edge of his 18-yard line. I can only assume then he's just switched off. But after that, Jim Leighton should be saving that. So he's near post. He should not be getting beat. He's near post from there. I mean, Basir's hit it well enough, but a goalkeeper the caliber Leighton will no doubt look back at that and think, yeah, I should have positioned myself much better there.
Yeah,
it was a real sucker punch.
Yeah, it would have been. Burley obviously gets sent off. Does Burley get sent off second half? Or?
He was sent off second half. It was already 2-0 at that point.
Yeah, we'll touch on the second goal. Hada scores just after the break to make it 2-0 to Morocco. Was that the kind of win sucked out of Scotland fans at that point?
Without a doubt. I mean, I watched the game with three of my mates at my mate's house, and every single one is at this point. As soon as that ball, when Leighton pushed it up, and then you see the ball hitting the roof of the net after it bounced in, the lot of us just turned in our near sofa, just our head in our hands, because we just knew it was gone. We just didn't see any way back at that point. It was an absolute. We weren't creating anything. The only thing I remember for the first half is Jury had a long range effort, which wasn't far wide, but other than that, we created absolutely nothing from the game, and it was. And then when that went in, you just thought, we've left ourselves with far too much to do. Because although we weren't conceding many goals, we didn't score a lot of goals either. And you just didn't see ourselves getting 3 goals back from that position.
Yeah, there's certainly not a response coming after Craig Bully's red card. It's just daft, isn't it?
It's just born out of frustration. Yeah, it's just born out of frustration. He's Basir starting to get away, and he's just wiped him out. Because FIFA at that point brought in the law to ban the tackling from behind. If it was a tackle from behind, it was a straight red card. And I think he wasn't even really complaining. He just saw the red and thought, well, just down the tunnel. He knew he'd done wrong, and it looked even worse with the fact he just dyed his hair bleach blonde as well. I don't know why he chose to do that, but yeah, it's not the blonde hair that got himself sent off. It was just frustration. That was all.
And the fate was sealed in 85 minutes when Basir scored his second of the game. At that point, did you just think they were beaten by a much better team?
Without a doubt. I don't know if Fimmer were a lot better than this. They were certainly faster than us, and they had more technical ability in the final third. I think the big thing is that we underestimated Morocco. I know Kevin Gallagher touched on that as well. We did underestimate Morocco slightly, and I think us as fans probably underestimated Morocco. Didn't really know a lot about them, but now we know everything about them after that night. It was a horrible, horrible night, and by the time that goal goes in, it's like, well, the game was going anyway.
And that's obviously finishes 3-0. Scotland are out of the World Cup. Did it soften the blow though that the other game in the group, Norway beating Brazil 2-1?
Not really. I was actually felt sorry for Morocco because they knew how we felt with the glorious failure. I thought Morocco were the better team out of the 3 sides, but it's all about points at the end of the day. And I thought the Norway penalty was pretty harsh. I'm not 100% convinced it was a penalty, but the boy Rekdal, we talk about Collins being cool under pressure. What coolness Rekdal showed to stick that away. That was a tremendous penalty as well. It was just sickening for us. But I did feel for Morocco. I remember the image of their manager kicking a water bottle into the dugout when he heard the news, and it's just, but from our point of view, it didn't really soften it. It would have been worse had we been the one that won 3-0, and then you hear that result. That would have been tough to take. But by that point, you didn't care. Yeah,
obviously the inquest starts after that with bottom of 1 point. Did you think with like a few weeks after it, that it was just Scotland had obviously played really well 2 games and just was disappointing the third? Did you just feel as if it was just taking chances?
Yeah, it was hard to put your finger on it. I think, to be honest, we just didn't have enough. We just didn't have enough quality in the final third, and that's what it boiled down to. Alan McCoy might have made a difference in a couple of the games, as we touched on, but then we needed more creativity to get in there. At the end of the day, we just weren't good enough. It was as simple as that. Unfortunately, the defence wasn't as good as it had been the year before. And see, when you look at the players at that point, there was a lot of guys in their early to mid 30s in the squad, and probably that didn't help having so much. It's all right having experience, but you've got to try and mix it about sometimes. But then at that same point, there wasn't a lot coming through. That's what we'll always defend Craig Brown, because the next 2 years you had to hang on to these players because there wasn't much coming through after that, because Scotland went through a period where they neglected youth completely, and it came back to bite us. So
after that tournament, obviously Scotland going to have a really good year, beating Germany and England. Did you think at that point that this would be the last tournament for 23 years?
No, not at all. I mean, the Germany one's obviously a friendly. Unfortunately, there was a couple of Euros qualifiers that were a sticking point. I mean, there was a very good Czech Republic team that won every single game. We also lost twice to them, but against the Czech Republic at home, we didn't get started and then lost 2. And that was infamous Gary McAllister game where he get booed and didn't play for Scotland. That was awful, absolutely awful. But away to Cherry Pub, we're 2 up, and then we lose the game 3-2.
Why did he get booed?
I think because people think he didn't deserve to be back in the squad as being the age he was. I think there was still a lot of people that didn't forgive him for missing the penalty against England. Whatever the reasons, it was disappointing. It was the first time I'd heard a Scotland player being booed by their own fans. It's a pet hate of mine. You do not boo your own players or your own team whilst they're playing. Save that for half time or full time to give your thoughts. You don't do it during the game. That's just an absolute pet hate of mine.
Couldn't agree more on that. But we'll touch on the manager, Craig Brown, as well. You've obviously spoke to Craig Brown. Did Craig Brown feel that his job might have been in jeopardy after a campaign like that?
No, because he'd already signed a contract to give him the next 2 tournaments, and I think he'd merited them because he'd also done well. I mean, normally, modern days, most international managers have 2 tournaments. They'll have 1 Euros and a World Cup. The first one that they're in. So, but back then, there was a few managers that managed to get more than 2 tournaments. And I think it was right to let Craig kick on, because although it wasn't a great performance in the World Cup overall, I think people admired the job that he did, given the fact there wasn't a lot coming through. And we still did okay. You know, if it isn't for David Seaman at Wembley making that save from Christian Daly, we're potentially taking that extra time and beating England. In fact, Kevin Keegan's pretty much admitted that Scotland would have went on to win that game because England were done. And then the following campaign, the World Cup one, it's a last-minute header from Daniel Van Boyten against Belgium that ultimately, that was a game we were 2-0 up after half an hour against 10-man Belgium, who weren't great back then, and we absolutely blew that. Had we done the job properly that day, we might have been looking at World Cup 2002, but unfortunately, it started a rot that didn't end until November 2020, thankfully.
And now looking back, how do you remember France 98?
I remember it with great fondness, Scott. I mean, obviously at the time we were disappointed that we went out in the first round again to continue that unwanted record of qualifying for so many finals and not getting into the next stage. I think that is a record number of appearances we've had without advancing. But now you look at it, like, it's taken us 22 years to qualify for another one. And maybe that's just what we should be looking at. Qualify first. That's your achievement. And after that's a bonus. So I'll look back at France night with fondness. It was, the build-up was absolutely fantastic. The fact that we're playing Brazil in the opening game with the glamour, the strip that we had, just the whole anticipation was excellent. In the iconic moment of Collins equalising, it's just a tournament that brings me great fondness. And not even just from a Scotland perspective being there. There was some good football, some great goals in that tournament, like Dennis Bergkamp in particular against Argentina was absolutely sublime. And a lot of big players shone, like Batistuta shone, Ronaldo shone, Davor Suker was outstanding. Jurgen Klinsmann did fairly well. Zidane obviously in the final. It's just a wonderful tournament that I'll look back with great fondness.
Yeah, it's one of the best memories a modern Scotland fan will have. But I just want to thank you very much for coming on, John. It's been an absolute pleasure to go through that. It was brilliant to get your thoughts.
Pleasure was mine, Scott. Thank you very much for inviting me on.
No problem at all. Thanks very much for listening, everybody, to our first episode of The Rewind. We'll be back soon with more episodes. Thanks very much, everyone. Cheers.